Good morning and welcome to my lecture at the New Life Expo here in Long Island. My name is Keith Sealand and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the basis for my new book, The Humaniverse Guide, Will E.T. Talk With Us? An opening statement is that with the proliferation, the massive increase in the amount of interest, UFO reports and sightings, and the vast history of UAPs, which are unidentified aerial phenomenon, reports, abductions, and unidentified craft basically relating to ET, it becomes harder and harder to deny the existence of extraterrestrial intelligences in the universe. So all that is left is to presume that they're going to be meeting us sometime, hopefully maybe very soon, and that we should begin to prepare and put a plan in action as to when that first contact and further relationship will take place. Just a quick introduction about who I am. My name is Keith Sealand. I've been a ufology researcher now for dedicated for over 14 years. Give you a little bit of a background. My motivation for getting started in the field of ufology, I had two motivations basically. This first one, this is an image of my father, Harold Sealand. He flew a B-17 in World War II. He flew 47 missions and had a flight crew of 12 on the B-17 plane. So in those 47 missions, there were 4 different missions to where they experienced, his flight crew and his sortie. These things here, they're called Foo Fighters. They were balls of light under intelligent control that flew all around the aircraft, on top of, below, on all sides, and were witnessed by the flight crew of 12 individuals who had all different visual angles from that. So very anomalous, and it's only the beginning of the modern age of ufology here in terms of the sightings and things like that. My other motivation continued on through my adult years and is up to current and probably will be for the rest of my life, in that there's been a great increase in the number of UFO, UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon sightings that have taken place in the mass media and all throughout the world. So this is a map, a 20-year period of the number of reported UFO, UAP reports in the green. I don't know if you can see these white dots here. Those are incidences, areas, geography where even more than one particular sighting has taken place. So this is just a map of the reported sightings. If, as expected and as suspected, that many more reports have gone unreported incidences, if those were to have been incorporated into this map would be entirely green and white. There's just so much of a library out there throughout history of reported sightings. I'll give you a quick inventory. This phenomenon has cut across through all walks of life, all different peoples, all different professions throughout history, and I'll give you a brief introduction to some of them, the more popular ones. This is President Ronald and Nancy Reagan. He had 2 particular UAP experiences, one as a private citizen and one as governor of California. This is Harry S. Truman, the sitting president at the time of the dropping of the atomic bombs, but also in 1947, the Roswell incident. It's interesting to note that just weeks after the Roswell in July of 1947, the U.S. created more new federal agencies at one point in time than in its entire history. The Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Association, the DOD, the creation of a separate Air Force splitting up from the Army, among other agencies. This is Dwight D. Eisenhower, who is suspected to be the most nuanced and most involved in all subjects, ufology and ET and whatnot. The nature of my talk here today, It's circular and is very connective in nature, my string theory, so to speak. I'm going to be talking about points now, and then later on circling back and referencing back to other points. So that there's all an interconnectedness between this whole discussion here. So going on, this is President George Washington, who during the Battle of Valley Forge, the Revolutionary War, his troops were losing, but he had an overnight experience of UAP to where he changed his battle strategy and propelled the revolutionary forces to a victory there, and ultimately victory in the Revolutionary War. Christopher Columbus, on his discovery of America, for the last 2 weeks, every night before he discovered San Sanibel Island, his crew and himself noticed lights in the sky seemingly moving under intelligent control, bobbing up and down amongst the western horizon, pointing them in the direction of San Sanibel Island. This is Sir Winston Churchill, who as a private citizen before Prime Minister of England, he had his own UAP experiences. So let's continue. And again, as I say, this phenomenon is cut across all walks of life. For example, this is the crew of Apollo 11, who while on the moon had their own experiences, and in which communications with NASA, who were on a continuous basis, somehow anomalously cut off during some of their conversations and discussions and experiences. Similarly, what happened to Sir Edgar Mitchell of Apollo 14 a little bit later on is another example of an astronaut who had their own experiences. He became, for the rest of his life, a staunch ufology and ETI supporter. Private normal citizens like you and me, Betty and Barney Hill, in September of 1961, they had an abduction experience near their home in New Hampshire. It became one of the most seminal and discussed and still studied cases of the last 60 years. The military was intrinsically involved in this whole process. This is Major Jesse Marcel of the Roswell incident, seen here posing in front of contrived and fake wreckage imposed upon him by his superior officers to try and debunk the previously announced incident that Roswell, that there had been a recovery of a spacecraft and bodies to go along with it. Another military officer, Colonel Charles Halt, in England in December, Christmas time of 1980, in the Rendlesham Forest in England, for 3 nights, and on the last night, him and his crew went out for 2.5 hours to witness a craft landing, taking off, other craft coming in, all seemingly under intelligent control. Amongst the evidence with this is that he had a 2.5-hour live tape recording. He carried a tape recorder wherever he went during his missions. So we've got 2.5 hours of audio, radar recordings, EMF readings, Geiger counter, plaster casts, and hundreds of witnesses from the U.S. and British military. Stephen Hawking, who is a youngster, a teenager before he developed his ALS disease, had his own UAP experience. As did this person, the discoverer of Pluto, Clyde Tombaugh, later on in the 40s and 50s as a professor in the University of New Mexico school system, had witnesses many times reported of the green and orange fireballs, the Foo Fighters that my father had seen just a few years before in World War II. Sir Edmund Halley, dipping back into history once again, discoverer of Halley's Comet, had his own experience, as did this person, Steven Spielberg, which, although he hasn't publicly admitted it yet, had his own UAP experience and may have been the driver of his move to come into the career that he undertook for his life so far. This is the title of my first book, The Humaniverse Guide to Better Reasoning and Decision Making. It's a deep dive into the history and development of the scientific methodology, describing it and allowing the reader to apply it to help solve problems in their everyday life. So there's some good utility from that. The rest of the book, it's a thick book, it details hundreds of cases of UAP from many different levels, and including discussions with some of the people that I've already introduced to you right now and will later on in my talk. This is the title of my second book, The Humaniverse Guide to First Contact with ET. It tests the hypothesis that is speculated among society that when, not if, first contact and what I call enduring global acknowledgement, EGA, enduring global relationship, EGR, when we get introduced to ET, that our cultural institutions such as religion, philosophy, and science will disappear or be irreparably harmed from it. At least that's the opinion and speculation in the public consciousness, at least right now. I test that hypothesis. This is bringing into more current the title of my new book, which is still at the publisher, finishing up the editing, and the nature of my talk here today, Humaniverse Guide, Will ET Talk With Us? Again, as I mentioned, with the long history of reports and of the phenomenon and interest and whatnot, it's harder and harder to deny the existence of some kind of intelligences from beyond Earth. So my motivations for writing this come from basically I sense a need and a great urgency for us to begin a proactive plan process for meeting ET for the first time and developing a relationship in as I mentioned, a proactive basis. There's some rationale that I'll give you here for my research on this. I'll just mention to you, I'm kind of an academic, but I would liken myself not to be of the highbrow nature or, you know, the stuffy arrogance that often comes from dealing with academia. But I do an awful lot of research, both boots on the ground and also dives into research and lots of citations and things like that there. So I put a very, very thoughtful analysis together. But some of the motivation and the rationale include, again, the recent increases in UFO study and interest. If you've seen in the news, the U.S. Navy's videos, and then fast forward last year, Department of Defense hearings, and the government has now created a separate agency for studying UFOs. And just a couple weeks ago, there was congressional hearings for the first time in 50 years on the particular subject. For those of you that may be familiar with some of the history of the field, back in the 1950s and 60s, there was a Project Blue Book that was undertaken. This current experience with our U.S. government is kind of, I call it a redo of Project Blue Book. So we can discuss more. I'll be here for the whole weekend. I'll be at a couple of panel conferences here, and then at my speaker author booth for the rest of the weekend. So if you have any points or questions or anything, I can give you a little bit of history on that. Another rationale in my delve into research here has to do with human nature. We need to learn to become more proactive in our decisions about big matters of national interest. Unfortunately, our human nature, we have a proclivity to being reactive. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. Okay, we all know what this is about. I'm not going to go into a long discussion. I will ask you one question and you can answer it in the privacy of your own thoughts. Do you think that we could have done a better job with common knowledge that COVID-19 existed for years and years? Can we be doing a better job with resolving this pandemic situation? I'll give you another example here. This was a popular poster in our society during the days coming up to World War II. It was common knowledge then that Japan was planning to attack the U.S. in some way or form for years beforehand. And the European theater had already started to take place. Hitler wasn't a new phenomenon. He didn't beam in from outer space. His regime had been built up over years. So my main maintenance here is that we were reactive in this whole situation, causing this brave soldier and those brave soldiers to have to wait to engage until this happened. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that is Pearl Harbor. How many thousands of lives, how many trillions of dollars were wasted because we chose to be reactive instead of proactive to that. As you can see here, this is a headline from the Hilo newspaper dated 1 week before Pearl Harbor. Again, just a little more evidence that we had prior knowledge. Could we have done a better job being proactive instead of reactive? Another proof, not proof of principle, rationale actually, for my research and writing. Has any planning, you may ask the question, any planning been done before in regards to looking for ET and whatnot? There's been throughout the years a little bit of academic research. Someone would write a very nuanced article about one topic, collect a paycheck, and then there'd be some peer review. The government in 1961, U.S. government through the Brookings Institution, 1960-61, they published a 200-page report titled Man's Future in Space. And out of 200 pages, 3 paragraphs were devoted to the subject of a potential for the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligences existing. 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. This is a copy of the plaque that was sent aboard 2 Pioneer spacecraft in 1972-73. Whoever finds the craft will see the plaque. They'll notice is the indigenous intelligence of where it came from, planet Earth, namely us. A diagram of where the origin, the provenance of the flight trajectory itself, out to this point. Actually, the scale is going to be way out here somewhere. This is an example of, it's kind of like a GPS, navigation instrument. These vectors are, with all the EMF frequency definitions here, vectors to the positions of 14 different pulsars throughout space. As the navigation instrument, this is our solar system. So whoever sees this map can point in on this target and kind of navigate, triangulate themselves over the positions of these pulsars here. This is also another display of our intelligence. That's an atom of neutral hydrogen. Hydrogen being the most popular element in the universe. Without hydrogen, we wouldn't be here having this talk today. It's just as simple as that. A couple of years later, Voyager spacecraft 1 and 2, 1976-77, sent out a similar kind of a project through the Pioneer project. As you can see here, this is the navigation instrument. There's the neutral hydrogen. This is a diagram of the phonograph record with some schematics and some EMF display, so to speak, frequencies that would need to help understand and put together a phonograph player, so to speak, which can then play this record, in which this encapsulates 45 minutes worth of sights and sounds from planet Earth and its indigenous life, not only human beings, but the animal kingdom. This is the most detailed investigation of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence out there, and that's exactly what this acronym means if you haven't heard of it, SETI. It was created in 1969 in part by this person, Dr. Frank Drake, seen here posing next to his famous Drake equation, which he developed in 1961. It's a great conversational piece that has continued on its popularity today. Please don't freak. I'm going to go through all of these variables here with you real quick, and it's real easy to understand and explain. The objective, the large N, is the number of civilizations where contact is, contact is possible. That's the answer to the whole equation here. It was created in 1961. The large N, back then, the value was estimated to be 10,000. Now, mind you, this is 61 years later, and all of these variables, with our increases in knowledge and advanced technology, the values of all these variables have gone up to where large N now is estimated to be upwards of 100 million. Let's go through this. The big R is the number of suns in the galaxy, Milky Way galaxy. F sub P is that number that have planets, and we now know that of all the planets we've discovered, systems, half of the systems have planets in them, at least, and it's ongoing. The small n is the number of Earth-like planets, which is approaching, I believe, 28% at last knowledge. F sub L is the percentage where life actually emerges. You can follow the progression from there. The F sub I is that percentage where intelligent life actually evolves. F sub C is that percentage in which the intelligent life can communicate. And the large L is just the lifespan of species. So there's not much more scientific value to the Drake equation except its continuing popularity in the narrative and to keep that narrative actually going. So on that basis alone, it's an interface from science to the public and keeps us interested in the phenomenon, things like that. Another rationale for my book is that contact is coming. Again, with the proliferation, almost exponential, increase in reported UAP experiences and more detailed experiences. It's just a matter of time as to when contact is actually going to happen. More military evidence here. Malmstrom Air Force Base, Minot, Walker, which is the modern day name for Roswell Airfield in Roswell, New Mexico. All of these fields had, Roswell doesn't, by the way, but Ellsworth, Rubinsk in Russia, these were all nuclear bases in which there's visual, audio, radar, EMF, and other evidence that UAPs would fly over and disable an entire field of nuclear warheads all at once. Boom. And it would last anywhere from minutes to hours, and then all of them would come back online. None of the human beings tending to any of these fields had any idea what was going on. They continue to this day. Particular nuance, Cape Canaveral in Florida, 2 launches of nuclear-tipped warhead test craft were done. Under visual inspection, it's spotted that unidentified lights, UAP, would fly up next to the warheads, shoot what was presumed to be a laser beam. Both aircraft exploded. It's all evidence. More and more as is built. Alexander the Great, he was conquering Asia and way back when, and had his own UAP vision, upon which he turned his army around, went back to Greece, and never tried to conquer another country for the rest of his life. Operation Mainbrace, an example of the circular nature of my talk. Remember Dwight Eisenhower. As a private citizen in September, he was part of the NATO war games aboard the USS Roosevelt. Himself and over 85,000 NATO military personnel, non-commissioned military officers, private civilians, citizens, whatnot, witnessed aircraft flying, landing at the British airfields, taking off again, flying over the destroyers in the ocean in the North Sea, diving into the water, coming out. This lasted for 2 weeks, 85,000 witnesses to that. I can go on and on and on with the witnesses. As I mentioned, it's been increasingly told to people in our society that contact is coming and that we should start to prepare for it. The Betty Barney Hill case, one of the messages given to them while during their abduction basically sums up some of these more popular points amongst all the inventory of abduction experiences. These are the popular messages that the humans are actually receiving. One, clean up your home planet and stop the hatred and continual wars. With our climate change, deforestation, and global warming and whatnot, it's harming our planet Earth. Stopping the hatred and the continual wars amongst ourselves, the communities that we represent and the socio-political nations that we are always in competition with in a warlike manner for some reason. We have no global perspective of humankind as a species. So ET has been telling all of their in their communications, scale back their runaway technology. The technology is good, but it seems, as in nature, one new creation seems to offer two different problems. So it's like, should we learn how to use our technology better as we develop it before we move on to the next one, I think is their point. Spread the word to prepare for ET's arrival. And I maintain, and it's part of my motivation, our civilization is at a decision-making inflection point. Another rationale that I had for my writing is why plan? I maintain that this must be, planning a proactive project for the arrival of ET must be a multidisciplinary effort. It can't be just the government and the military. It can't be just politics and bullets. Our civilization is built up, as you can see here, from so many different institutions and cultures, philosophical, legal, theological, economic, artistic, and whatnot. For a proactive plan to have the best chance of working, we have to have representatives. This is our best foot forward. We have to have team building from all of these different members in order to enact the best proactive project for the actual meeting of ET and whatnot. Along the way, this project will show us and teach us a lot about team building, global cooperation, create a sense of connectedness that we should develop amongst ourselves as individuals and our communities and our Earth. Create a consciousness, both Earth and cosmic consciousness, develop our human condition, allow use of our technology to provide simulation analysis of different contact scenarios, and being proactive in nature that it will be cost effective. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these more details of some of these points as proof of principle, proof of concept for why we should start doing a proactive project. As I may have intimated a few minutes ago, our species has lost the ability to achieve a connectedness, not only amongst ourselves and our communities, but our environments and the Earth itself, in which I call this Biosphere 1, which is just another name for the Earth. This is an image of what I mean. Here's modern man, you and me standing here, and we're looking across this big chasm at our ancients. I maintain, and just talk to any Native American if you don't want to believe me, that our ancestors were a lot more holistic and had a lot more harmony and resonance with their environments and planet Earth, Biosphere 1, than we do today. We're looking maybe across the chasm at them, searching for answers, but we're stuck in what I call a rabbit hole in our individual everyday lives. We're ultra competitive. When we drive to work, we're more interested in beating the other person to the next red light instead of just getting to the destination. Competitive at work, competitive in our communities, in our environment around us. It's just obsessive to the point where my summing up of this point, as I took a quote from my book, today our temperament is more isolated than connected with anything beyond the rabbit hole of our everyday lives. We all seem to have our rabbit holes, and it's getting harder and harder for us to be able to climb out of them. So a proactive plan designed for first contact to raise our species' consciousness and existential dependence on Earth, Biosphere 1. So let me take a couple of seconds here. This is, you'll get a better perspective on Biosphere 1. This is Biosphere 2. It was a science experiment created by the US government and NASA in the 1980s and 90s. They conducted 2 experiments. They enclosed teams of 8 scientists inside this dome here for 18 months, in which they had to produce their own oxygen, produce their own food. They couldn't open the doors to get out, simulating what it would be like for humankind when we go to other planets, land on them, and we don't have any accoutrements that are available on our planet Earth, which is, Earth is a pretty living, breathing, alive instrument, so to speak. Biosphere 2. Incidentally, the U.S. government gave this up in the mid-90s, but the University of Arizona took over the project. They're located outside of Tucson, and if you're in the area, this is great brain food for an afternoon, entire afternoon. You can tour through it and see what was going on then, and continuing experiments that U of Arizona are doing now in relation to environment and Biosphere 1, which is just, again, another name for our planet. This is a photo from a perspective outside of orbit, so it's a little bit farther out, but it's a real photo. I want to mention, as part of our potential for developing a cosmic consciousness and a connectedness with ourselves, I want to describe this here real quick. It's a phenomenon called the overview effect. It was only not invented, but discovered during the Apollo cruise, when man started going into orbit and getting to the moon. All the astronauts, when they go up into orbit or to the moon in the Apollo cases, they experienced a whole new sense of euphoria and a whole new different perspective looking down on the Earth. It was life transforming for all of them to this day, and as continues. They now realize that the Earth, Biosphere 1, is a living, breathing organism, and there's a great chain of life that surrounds Earth. Maybe a better visual for you is to maybe think of it this way. The universe is one big living organism. The Earth is just one cell in that big organism. But it is a very vibrant, living, and very fragile one also. Incidentally, this is a photo from orbit, the entry point, terminus of the Suez Canal. So all the astronauts experienced this. And for a little different perspective, this is kind of a combination imagery here of the Earth and this overview effect. And for us to have our problems as an intelligence, we have knowledge of these things. This is what sets us apart, is our intelligence from all the other indigenous animal life that we have. And then this great chain of life that is Earth, we are the stewards. We are the most intelligent creatures on. So we have a duty and a responsibility to maintain Biosphere 1 in its living, breathing, because that's the only thing that we have. If we let Earth go away, then we go away as a species also. So that's why this whole thing is all interweaved and connected up in a string theory kind of a way. So this was kind of the creation of the overview effect. It first started getting studied actually within a few weeks after this time in 1968. This is the iconic Earthrise photo from the Apollo 8 astronauts at Christmas time. As I mentioned, another proof of principle, proof of concept for us to start going on a project is to rediscover our holistic tendencies, our holistic purposes. I'll give you the definition of holism in that it is parts of a whole that are in intimate interconnection, can't exist without each other, independently of the whole, and is greater than the sum of its parts. Now I'm going to bring up this image again, and I maintain, and again, you can talk, for example, to any Native American you wish to. They will tell you their heritage takes them back, and they were a lot more, and continue to be more holistic, and hold those values and harmony and resonance with their environment and planet Earth than we seem to be right now. So we need to rediscover, close up this chasm. And I mean, with the deforestation and the harm we're doing to our planet, that's just examples of us needing to. I'll give you another example of our unholistic tendencies. Take a tree. If I was to ask you, give me 2 advantages that a tree would have. Most people probably would say, well, the tree has leaves. If it starts raining, you run under the tree and you stay dry. Also, a tree provides wood for what we use to build houses with. Okay, that's okay. I can throw this point at you that Houses built of wood with a lot of tender loving care could last 100, 150, maybe 200 years. Our ancients, and we're still discovering and will continue to discover many structures, pyramids, whatnot, that have lasted for thousands and thousands of years and could still be livable if we had the desire with which to do so. But that's not my point. One very salient purpose of a tree that probably no one will bring up, that's an example, the chemistry written up symbol for oxygen. Trees produce oxygen. Without trees, we don't have this conversation here today. With the deforestation that's going on, it's just another example of us not caring as much about the planet and our survival and lives as we should be. So that's just another reason for getting into a proactive plan and design. Another proof of principle has to do with, as I mentioned before, creating and developing a cosmic consciousness. We really don't seem to have much of a consciousness towards that right now. We used to watch the space shuttles take off for a few minutes and then go back to the rabbit hole or the rat race, which is our everyday lives. So E.T. is coming from there, from outer space, and will continue to do so. We will be going to outer space. So it kind of behooves us to start to develop a cosmic consciousness. It's nice and romantic for us, as in the example of this hiker, to look out at night at the fantastic aura of the Milky Way galaxy and whatnot. But as is written in a line in a famous song, you can see the stars and still not see the light. We would like to come to this point as a species. If we can get through all of our problems and be able to advance, we're not anywhere near that yet. But if we do a proactive plan development for the arrival of ET and whatnot, we can certainly move a long way towards getting to that point. Another proof of principle, proof of concept, is developing what I call our human condition. Let me give you this in the form of a mathematical definition here. Human condition, to me, means the core essences of the existence of our species, humankind. It consists of, and as you can see here, delta meaning changes, it's the fluid nature of it all. The change in our human natures, plus the change of our life experience. We all go through unique life experiences, and that's this equation is all interconnected with each other, as are the changes in our socialization activities, our cultural customs, our worldviews, our unique life purposes, and the conscious connectedness to Biosphere 1 and the cosmos. As there is a great chain of life for planet Earth, there's a great chain of life towards our human condition. And as we go through our lives, our experiences are going to help define and shape the changes in all of these aspects of it, to where the core essences, which is the totality of our human condition, will be shaped from it. So applying this to a proactive first contact project, let's start to raise awareness and consciousness to develop our human condition and integrate and practice a cosmic perspective. Again, as I maintain, these are evidential and existential to successful evolution and our survival. We're destroying our planet, it's pretty evident. Our human nature, which is a very important element. I put this image up here because, yeah, we seem to be questioning quite a few things here. This is us, modern man, looking back on our ancients, maybe trying to find answers and whatnot. The only deficiency I see with this is that maybe there should be another one of us actually looking forward also into the future, as we can help to shape our human conditions to move towards cosmic consciousness and way of life. This is a needs hierarchy that was developed by psychologist Abraham Maslow in the 1940s. He describes here at the base of this pyramid that our physiological needs, such as oxygen, food, drink, houses, living structures, whatnot. We have to satisfy these needs before we can move up the hierarchy and satisfy all these other abstract or maybe esoteric needs along the way. Our belonging to our membership in communities, humans as a social creature, our self-esteem and our cognitive needs. Towards his objective, Maslow's, was to develop a sense of self-actualization. The apex of this pyramid, the top here, transcendence, this was not part of his original work, his original theory, but it's a 21st century edition here, and I like it. I equate transcendence to basically meaning cosmic consciousness. Now that we've gone to the moon and we're planning on doing it again within the next 2 years, we should start to rediscover and develop our sense of transcendence, cosmic consciousness, as part of our human condition. This is us. We're a social animal. We've basically always been since recorded history started and well before it, according to evidence, and will continue to be in the future. Going back to my quote, we seem to be more isolated in our everyday lives than in recent memory. And again, as our life experiences and socialization and everything develop, these will help shape our worldviews. Maybe getting down to reducing and eliminating the prejudice and the bigotry and the hatred and all the wars that we're having with each other. These things will all be developed as we develop our human condition. Another fluid aspect has to do with our purpose in life. I hate this image, but it makes my point in a great way. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, this is a fishbowl. Does our life mean more than living inside of a fishbowl? Yeah, our rat race chase for all the physical baubles, our nice cars, our work computers, our vacations, the airplanes, the cruise ships, the beach houses, the beach in itself. I maintain that our purpose in life should be contained in one heck of a larger fishbowl than what is actually described here in this image. We just have to, we're aware of it, we just have to make it part of our consciousness and start practicing it. So basically, are we too materialistic in our lives nowadays? Here is maybe an end product of cosmic consciousness. As you can see, the perspective, the overview effect, so to speak. And this is an example of maybe an ET of some sort or whatever. But we're living and in harmony with each other, looking back on Earth and discovering the beauties of what the universe has for us. So here is a summary definition of recap of human condition, which is the core essences of our existence is Homo sapiens sapiens, so to speak. This is another diagram of that equation in a different format, so to speak. Human condition being the basis of it. Another proof of principle, proof of concept that plan design can work now instead of waiting to be reactive until ET actually shows up and introduces himself is that, again, it must be multidisciplinary in nature. Our existence, our civilization is built up of more than government and the military. And it's like creating a team of United Nations without the socio-political aspects of it. It's interesting here. I can talk with you later here. The United Nations, there's currently a project going on right now called Project Titan, in which a proposal has been sent to the United Nations to allow for creation of a new office for extraterrestrial research and starting to work toward my objective in my talk. San Marino is going to be the place where they will hold annual worldwide symposiums. The United Nations has to agree to the proposal first, so it's step 2 out of step 5. But I can talk more about Project Titan later and some of the directors involved with it, but that's just a point that's actually developing right now as I speak. Another proof of principle, proof of concept is that we have the technology with which to do simulations. We can simulate tornadoes and hurricanes and whatnot and get a better grasp predicting when those things are going to happen. We can do the same thing here. Simulations runs of many contact scenarios will offer us many benefits, both extrinsic and intrinsic, towards first contact and ET actually introducing themselves. And active plan work will show us throughout the process how to evolve our human condition, prepare us for first contact, and EGA, EGR, enduring global relationship. Another proof of principle, proof of concept, is I maintain that we can minimize a victim scenario through all of this proactive planning, or what I call the colonialism syndrome. If you go through our history, Columbus, Cortez, the Spanish conquerors, the Dutch conquerors, the English explorers and whatnot, they were meeting indigenous all over the world. And while the explorers had the advanced technology, they were just meeting human beings. We all had basically the same thought processes, pretty close to the same intelligence. The difference here is that ET is presumably going to be a lot more intelligent than we are. So doesn't it behoove us to maybe start to prepare a plan of action for that? We will know a lot more when we plan ahead than wait until the event happens. That's a quote from my book. And I'll bring in those governments that have advanced knowledge. It's a call out to the governments to become more transparent. Tell us what they know. And a lot of them are starting to do that. The US has started, although we're way behind. Brazil, Chile, France, England, Germany, Japan, Australia have released all of their UFO documents, which equates to what I saw before in the hundreds or thousands of terabytes of information, what they have about the ufology phenomenon. So it's not a case of does ET exist. Let's move past that. It's growing more and more implausible to be able to deny it. So those governments, they should start to be more transparent and tell us so that we can do a better plan. One more proof of principle, proof of concept is that being proactive will be cost effective. As I gave you a couple of examples, how many lives were lost at Pearl Harbor and how many trillions of dollars were wasted because we waited to be reactive. And as we're still living through the pandemic at this time in 2022, how many lives were lost, how many trillions of dollars were spent? Could we have done a better job? So the plan design, in summary, is going to help cure our disconnectedness with us as human beings and towards our environment and planet Earth, help to create a cosmic consciousness, rediscover our sense of holism, develop our human condition in positive existential ways, allow us the opportunity to use our intelligence and technology to run more simulation scenarios, to become more cost effective, and to minimize my victim scenario or sense of colonization. That it must display and use all of our cultural institutions, such as all of these professions right here. So this is the title of my book. In closing, I just have two things to say here. This is a quote from my book. In the evolutionary process that is our human condition, for life on Earth to exist and develop, it has been, is, and will continue to be all about the harmonious resonance dynamic between its most intelligent life form, us, our human natures, our human condition, and all the other natural forms and features of both Biosphere 1 and by extension the cosmos and its life forms. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't need a new story. We just need a new way to tell our story. Thank you for all your attention and time. You've been real kind. I'll be at my table for the rest of the weekend. I'll be part of two, at least one panel discussion. There's a second one that's up in the air. There was illness, but to one of the moderators. But I'll be here for the whole weekend. So if you have any questions, I'd love to have a conversation with you and discuss any points and answers that you might have. So thanks a lot for your.
Why do you think these governments are becoming, more transparent now? Is it? Do you think they're maybe okay? We can't keep the lid on this anymore, and we might as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's a far larger rabbit hole than all of us have in our individual lives. I think there's a lot of factors that go with it. It's harder to keep a lie. You have to keep you have to keep expanding, telling more lies. It's harder to keep things covered up the longer. The public is demanding more and more. There could be, for another reason, we don't know this, we're speculating, there could be, within the ufology community, there's lots of discussions about a big cosmic galactic war going on, where human beings have been dragged into by treaty and by agreement and whatnot. So if that is actually true, and more humans are asked to engage in this intergalactic war in some reason, it's going to be harder and harder to deny, or to also how do I put this, kind of less train of thought here. Yep, we're ready to wrap it up. So there's lots of reasons why I think it's coming more towards a head, and just the sheer explosion of information and cases and experiences. I mean, the U.S. Navy, even though this, what I call the redo of Project Blue Book, it doesn't have much legs yet, but it's progress in that. One big difference is that for the U.S. to become interested in it once again is back in the 1950s, Project Blue Book, it was determined that now there's a public frenzy, there's no threat to national security, national concern, so let's get the public away from it, divert them into something else. We want to keep it covert. Today, the government is now saying this is a matter of national security. So that's one big change over this version of Project Blue Book than was back in 70 years ago. So, and again, the body of history from so many more experiences, sightings, abductions, experiences, things like that. So all of those things are part of the whole picture in my view as far as moving towards. Plus, our technology is a lot better. We're able to detect more and more from data, more and more details about the nature of these UAPs and whatnot. So it becomes less deniable that these are intelligent craft, and they're not flown by Russia or China or the U.S. or whatnot. Some of them are just too advanced for us. So there's lots of factors, I think, involved to answer your question there, but it's all being evolved. So I think time is pretty much up here. Okay, very good. Like I said, I'll be at my table. I've got a panel discussion this afternoon. That's the questionable one, and then one tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. So thanks for all your kind attention.